Welcome to Nice Guys Transmission Shop. Kyle, we're not a transmission shop.
No, we'll just follow the script today, Dale, and just go with that, all right?
Okay. So today we're working on tweaker, putting in a transmission. It's a 16-hour job. No, I'm not doing it if it's a 16-hour job. No,
Dale.
I'm done. I'm out of here.
The math on this, it is going to be a 16-hour job. We're going to break this down, make it easy for people to understand. Step-by-step process, just how to remove a transmission in a GMT 400 truck. Follow along, it should be pretty easy to comprehend. We're going to get into an overview here. Ran into a little bit of an audio problem when we were filming this, but the underside here contains all your components that you're going to be taking out. The transmission transfer case, you've got some cross members up in there that you're going to have to remove, and we'll make sure that we break down each step for you. Torsion bar set up. To remove these torsion bars, there's a little dimple next to this bolt. That's the key to adjust the height of the torsion bar. Torsion bar runs up to the lower control arm. You got to go get yourself a special tool to preload these so you can remove the bolt. Got the bolt out, then you take a little key out. When we loosen this, the torsion bar should be completely limp.
We are going from the torsion bar to, what are we doing?
We went from torsion bar to drive shaft. We ran into some technical difficulties. Thought we had some video we didn't have.
Right.
Our bad, but all you do after you remove those keyways is you take that cross member out, pull it back, and then you jump into drive shafts is the next step.
No big deal.
Drive shaft has a flange on this side. It's a slip yoke on that side, meaning it just sits on the output shaft. The splines do. These are 11mm bolts. Caps come out with the bolts. Before you remove this, we want to run a paint line so that we know how it goes when we reinstall it. Oh, there we go. This side's just that slip yoke. Don't tell Tim.
Oh my fucking gosh.
The output shaft seal's leaking.
You fucking idiots, dude.
We'll just get we're gonna make a bigger mess. Getting our electrical connectors out of the way. Got one back there, one under here. And you got two up here and a vent tube that you have to take off. And then you can start thinking about getting this cross member out of the way. Overview of what we have left. Front drive shaft is gonna come out. We're gonna support the transfer case and the transmission with transmission jacks and take the transfer case transmission cross member out so we can get to the bolts that hold the transfer case to the transmission. Then we have some linkage and electrical connectors on the driver's side of the transmission and some fluid lines on the passenger side of the transmission. Inspection plate, torque converter, and then we'll take the starter out and we will be very close to bell housing bolts. Took some of the bolts out so it'll drain towards one side of the pan once it stops leaking like this, and we'll consider taking more bolts out. Otherwise you just make a huge mess. These are 1/2-inch bolts for the transmission pan. How much gunk is in that pan? All of it? A lot of metal. All the metal. Just full of metal. Those are the clutches.
This is garbage. I don't know what to say.
We need to do better.
Audio is bad, we need better sound. Our framing isn't great, we should probably get more than one camera. We need better organization,
I think you just have gas. Probably what we should have done is filmed it in a step-by-step pattern.
Right.
From start to finish,
Right.
explaining each step as we went.
Among many other things. This is just, I apologize to the viewers right now because you're not going to get anything from this except for there's some entertainment.
It's
later.
pretty funny at the end,
It is.
I think.
Dale's an idiot and I'm an idiot, but other than that, they're not going to learn how to do a transmission from this.
Yeah.
What they will see is that we have synergy
Yeah.
and we actually play off each other very well.
And that's going to continue into the new style that we talked about.
Right. I think this is a good time to tell them about
The
Patreon.
Yeah. Let's just throw an ad in there.
I think so.
All right.
Dale?
Yep.
All right. We started a Patreon
We sure did.
with exclusive content that you can't see anywhere else. Won't be available on YouTube.
We're going to have things like Shop Talk, where we're sitting in this setting, deep dive into cars, and then behind the scenes primarily is the other thing where you get to see our whole process.
And with your Patreon subscription, we'll provide free merchandise, hats, beanies, t-shirts, all those good things. And with that subscription, it'll add value to the shop. It'll help us build and improve our content.
Which improves your viewership, because right now we don't have things like proper sound
Yeah, or insulation,
or lights.
or drywall that would help eliminate some of this echo.
Yeah.
We have one single 150-foot extension cord running the entire power in the shop.
Comes out of my garage.
Which means we have to unplug things to plug other things in, and if we trip the breaker, we've got to go all the way to the house to reset it.
No heat, so I'm wearing like 75 layers.
Yeah. Ultimately, our goal here is take all the money from Patreon and improve our process to provide better content. We're not going to take a single dime of profit from the Patreon account.
No, it's
it all
going
goes back into the shop,
shop.
and for the purpose of delivering better content for the viewers.
Yeah, our overall vision is to provide you the best content we can with cool and interesting projects that we love to do.
Thank you guys. Thanks for your support. We really appreciate it. Join our Patreon. Help us out.
Next step we have after the transmission has been taken out and rebuilt is we want to flush these lines. You got to find your feed line and return line. How do you know which one's your feed line? Well, you scoot on over here. The one that goes into the cooler is the feed line. The one that comes from the radiator is the return line. What we're going to use to clean the cooler, because it's called cooler clean. They cut a length of hose to make this work. Now it's empty, blowing air through the system, and we're going to blow it out again. 50 psi.
Installing a torque converter on our 96 K1500 step side. The thing you want to focus on is finding your 3 clicks when putting the torque converter on the output shaft. On the output, input, whichever shaft you want to put it on. So you want to spin it a little bit. That's 1. 2. It's installed.
6 bell housing bolts. These are alignment dowel pins. There's your bottom one. One above that, that's your alignment dowel. And then scoot the eyes up there. No center bolt. And the other side just mirrors. Pretty cool.
So that's the dowel alignment. So we got the first bell housing bolt in there just to hold it so we can get the other side lined up.
This side we're just a little bit low. So even though that side's lined up, we'll have to come up a little bit and it'll pivot on that one bolt we started, and we'll be able to line this one up. You want to get your torque converter lined up. You can see the marks from where the old one came out on this flex plate versus this hole has no marks. So we want to make sure we get the torque converter lined up with where it's supposed to go. You can spin the torque converter relatively easy, but you won't be able to spin the flex plate without having a tool on your crank bolt up front. This goes onto a stud on the bell housing. You have to start it this way, get it down in, and then twist it. And Tim will show you what it looks like at the bottom. Hold on, I'm gonna get it. Yep. Transmission's more or less installed, just need to torque down bell housing bolts. This is the transfer case. You know it's the front of the transfer case because you have your drive shaft here. This is the part that goes onto the output shaft of the transmission. And the seal that fails on the transmission lets transmission fluid come in between here. Then this seal fails and the transfer case overfills with transmission fluid, which is why we ended up having probably 2 or 3 times the amount that should have been in there when we were taking this out. So you notice we have a new seal in here. We've got a new little paper gasket just in case there is a leak. These bolts will go in from the front toward the back. And then on the back of the transfer case here, when we go to fill this, this is our fill plug. If you're ever going to change the fluid, that's your drain plug. And then the rear drive shaft will just slide on. It's called a slip yoke. Slips right over that shaft. Closing thoughts, forgot to mention, when the transmission fluid moves from the transmission to the transfer case, not only does it overfill this and run the risk of blowing up your transfer case, but then you're low on fluid in your transmission and you're going to burn it up, which is what happened in ours. All the clutch packs start burning out because they don't have any fluid to lubricate things.
Dale has lowered our transmission here just a tad because there is the output shaft right there. You can input shaft from the transfer case to the output shaft of the transmission. And we got our bolts in. As you can see, Dale is high speed Vinny D'ing. And the entire time that Dale and I have been down putting that transfer case in, Kyle has been up here Vinny D'ing the bell housing bolts. You can live your life a quarter mile at a time. In our shop, if you're gonna Vinny D something, you're living your life a quarter turn at a time. What do you think, Dale?
Yeah. I had to take the distributor cap off to get to these bell housing bolts. You can't see them. They're just, you gotta really get. The correct way to install the transmission cross member is before you put the transfer case back in. We didn't do that. So instead we used a 3.5 foot 4x4 to jack the transfer case up as high as we could, slide the torsion bar cross member up, and then put a 2x4 to hold everything together while we put this cross member in. We had to reposition everything here because our first idea failed. Don't do it this way. Horrible idea. We're reinstalling our mount here for the transmission. Then we just gotta, we probably wanna bolt it in place. Yeah. This is the bolt that's gonna hold the cross member to the frame. You're gonna go bolt up through the frame. Then the sleeve is going to sit, so the frame's going to be between the sleeve and the bolt head. And then the nut goes on top. It'll all hold together just like that. And we'll probably grab the Ugga gun and send her home. Is that torque to spec?
Yeah.
Just got to finish up getting these last two nuts on the studs for the trans mount. Inspection plate. Still have the exhaust loose to allow clearance. Well, what are we stuck on? There we go. This is the most aggressive inspection plate I've ever seen in my entire life. It becomes a structural part of the bell housing almost. This little baffle has a flange on one end and not on the other. That flange sits up into the manifold, and then the baffle goes on.
Oh, I just had to realign the starter so it engaged the flywheel.
Flex plate.
Flex plate.
Now that it's installed, what's the next step?
To connect the positive to the starter.
Do you want to have the battery connected or disconnected while you're doing this?
Disconnected
Yeah? Okay.
is optimal.
That sounds like a good idea.
So you don't get zapped.
Remember when we painted our drive shaft here? No paint on this end, but we do have paint on that end. This weight was put on by whoever built this drive shaft, and it's very important that it goes on the right way or else you get a horrible vibration. So our paint mark is over here on this side. We put our caps in just to keep track of them, so I'll take those out, slide this part into the back of the transmission, make sure my paint line is going to line up with my paint line, and then tighten everything down. Easier to move the rear end a little bit to make this line up. We determined our paint marks line up really well up here on the front of this drive shaft to the front axle, which is good because this drive shaft has a skinny end and a fat end, so it's easy to remember which side goes where.
The front drive shaft wasn't fitting properly, so we had to loosen all 6 bolts on the transfer case to slightly move it back.
I'm very excited about the build we have on this truck. I'm just not excited about this part of it. Got all of our electrical connectors in. Oxygen sensor pulled away from the catalytic converter there. The motor for the fly-by-wire 4-wheel drive setup. Speedo sensor. Ran the cord along the top. Couple of connectors up on top. The transfer case. There's all the shifting linkage. Couple of connectors on there as well. Put the vent tube up on one of those bell housing bolts to hold it in an upright position. Then we had another oxygen sensor, loops around there through that little housing in the frame, and then we just zip tied the wire out of the way. The torsion key slides up. You have room there to put your retainer, and then the bolt slides in, the threads in rather. Retainer there.
He's got a transmission jack that he's standing on because Kyle is vertically challenged.
And also an idiot.
This is all trash footage anyway, so
Well, we
watching
gotten something.
watching you two guys do the same thing but different.
We had to change the oil pump when we got underneath this thing. We did all kinds of oil stuff. There's a separate video on that. Oil pan, oil pump, oil pickup, all kinds of stuff. Rear main, all kinds of stuff. Because when you're in there and you've got all the parts disassembled, it's just do everything you can while you're there. Because the parts are very expensive, but the labor is. Since we got that oil pump changed, we want to test to make sure that the oil pump is working before we actually fire this bad boy up. We are going to spin the motor over with the coil disconnected so that it won't actually ignite. Unfortunately, our gauge is already at 40 here, but hopefully it'll go down and come back up once we give it some power. You ready, Kyle? Battery's dead. Okay. You ready to try it again? Oh, it started to build oil pressure.
Yeah.
41.
40 plus.
Who hired Kyle?
You did, sir.
I hired
you
Kyle?
did.
He is probably the worst employee I've ever had.
I know.
I don't know, man. I might have accidentally put the transmission fluid in the engine oil.
Wow.
Feel that smooth shift?
Oh, super smooth. Transmission! 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 You need a transmission!
You got a transmission.
You got a transmission! Got a transmission! Got a transmission? Needs a transmission.
It's a transmission.